Heist. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it'll change your life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dungeon Master of None. Rob here, doing a solo episode. I'm going to be talking about a book that is more relevant to me. I'm going to be talking about Skullport Dragon Swindle by Alex Clippinger. Sent us a review copy. It is now out in full. I'll provide a link in the show description, but I wanted to go over this one because I've run Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and I am currently, at least in part, running Dungeon of the Mad Mage, so this is particularly relevant to me. Matt hasn't run either of those, so I wanted to talk about it. So this is going to be a little short one, but Alex was kind enough to send us a review copy, and I have already integrated a bunch of these ideas into my campaigns, and I'm really excited by this book. I think it's a really cool idea, and so I wanted to do a little bit of a review. So in order for you to really get what this is about and get the value out of it, this is a hack of Waterdeep Dragon Heist, sort of a reskin. So if you have not run Waterdeep Dragon Heist, if you're not interested in it, if you're not really interested in the setting at all, you can probably skip this one, but this one's going to be a little bit short because I want to cover this without doing any spoilers. And, if you haven't done either Waterdeep Dragon Heist or are familiar with the subject matter, I want you to be able to listen to this and get a sense for what it is. So hopefully it's interesting and perhaps tantalizing, and you should definitely check it out yourself if you're interested. So here we go. This is a super useful book if you are, in my opinion, if you're running anything in Waterdeep, if you are going to go to Skullport as part of your Dungeon of the Mad Mage adventure. And I'm going to talk about why that's particularly valuable. But what it's most useful for is if you want to run a little bit of a different type of Waterdeep Dragon Heist campaign. And especially if you want to run a evil or morally gray campaign. If Waterdeep Dragon Heist sort of assumes that you're going to ally with the forces of, if not, good, at least order. And so Skullport gives you the option to basically play the same adventure, but with a whole new set of NPCs, factions, and it sort of shifts the moral center a little bit, which is, I think, really neat. So let's get down to nuts and bolts. So to be clear, and this is according to the author himself, you do, and I agree, definitely need Waterdeep Dragon Heist to run this. It provides you a lot of tools to adjust the original setting of the campaign book Waterdeep Dragon Heist, but you're going to need the original. So this is sort of an add-on, but you can't really, it's your standard expansion pack. You can't play Brood War without the original StarCraft, so just bear that in mind. You don't need Dungeon of the Mad Mage for this. Dungeon of the Mad Mage, if you haven't read through it, does include a section on Skullport. It is brief. And one of the great things about this book is that it provides you a much more thorough explanation of and list of locations and a gazetteer of sort for Skullport, which is really, really handy. So with that in mind, that's really all you need to get started. This is meant to be a change of maybe you've run Waterdeep Dragon Heist, or maybe you like the idea, but you're not really sold on the specifics. This really gives you a lot to work with. So initially, what you're getting is, all of the same chapters and story beats from Waterdeep Dragon Heist are there. They've just been adjusted to take place in Skullport. And if you're not familiar, Skullport is a secret pirate underground port located in Undermountain, and you can get there a number of different ways. It's secret. It is run by a bunch of ancient flame skulls put there by Hallister Blackcloak way back in the day. Actually, that might not be true. They're there. They're fireballs. They're fire skulls. and they sort of run the town. It's full of criminals and drow and all sorts of good folks. So it's an interesting and different place. It hasn't been elaborated on a ton in 5th edition. Like I said, it's there's a section on it in Dungeon of the Mad Mage, but it's really just sort of peripheral. So this will give you all the tools you need to actually go there and run a campaign there. So just like Waterdeep Dragon Heist, you've got a set of villains, and in Dragon Heist there's your standard Xanathar, evil mage, beholder, drow, rogue types, and the ones that have been added for Skullport are appropriate to the setting. There's a scum lord, an ancient aboleth, which I love aboleths. There's a insane mage, a rag mage, and then this is really interesting. This is one of my favorite things. Clementure has added Remalia Haventree, the leader of the Harpers, as a potential enemy. And we've talked about before about how the Harpers are, even though they're technically a good organization, it's actually really interesting. They do some pretty gray area stuff. And so if you've got an evil party or a chaotic or, even just sort of like a morally gray party, having Remalia Haventree as your principal antagonist can be a really interesting campaign. The seasons, there's just sort of like autumn, fall, and winter, summer in Waterdeep associated with each of the villains. The seasons in Skullport are growing season, flooding season, and dying season, because this is a underground cavern city with no sun and fungus and miserable wetness appropriately. So the adventure then goes through each of the, like I said, the main story beats of Waterdeep Dragon Heist. You have the same encounter with Volo and with Floon to get you started. The players then, just as they do in Dragon Heist, acquire a manor. This time, instead of Troll Skull Manor, it is Mindflay Manor. In the Illithid Way. Again, appropriate to something associated with the Underdark and Undermountain. Otherwise, everything is largely the same. You have the same shops and associates for the most part in the same area. Again, Chapter 3 takes the players in another direction as they become more embroiled in a search for a cache of golden dragons. There's been a slight change to the reasoning behind, the hidden dragons to fit Skullport, but it's mostly the same. And then Chapter 4 is sort of more freeform. It allows the players to sort of investigate on their own and go and hunt down their antagonist. Like Waterdeep Dragon Heist, there's also layers for each of the new villains, and this is just super great. We talked about how in Waterdeep Dragon Heist the layers aren't necessarily going to even end up in your campaign, but they're just such a great resource. And if your players do end up later in their careers going after Xanathar or against Yarlaxle, Bainro, the Castellanters, it's super great to have these as reference. So it's the same in Skullport. There's a description of each of the layers, one for Remalia, one for the Scum Lord, and one for the Rag Mage. Super interesting, well-designed dungeons with lots of lore and flavor to work with. These are things that are great to borrow from for your own campaign. And then the last two sections, and this I think is frankly worth the price of admission all on its own, are the Chapter 8 is it's called Skullport, a 2 copper tour, which is just like the Waterdeep Gazetteer from Waterdeep Dragon Heist, which goes into details about what Skullport is and what its history is, who lives there, all the things that you want to know, which, I was missing from Dungeon of the Mad Mage. It was always so strange to me that they included it without really explaining what was there, and that gives the DM a lot of opportunity to investigate and expand for themselves, but it also leaves a lot of questions unanswered. So Klippinger has done a lot of work here to expand on the history and the personage and sort of the flavor and idea of Skullport. Klippinger has divided Skullport into 3 separate levels. There's lower, a middle, and an upper level, and just added a ton more locations and NPCs. This, I think, if you are going to send your players, or if they want to go to Skullport as part of Dungeon of the Mad Mage, or if perhaps their Waterdeep Dragon Heist adventure or something after Waterdeep Dragon Heist takes them there, I think it's just really essential. Like I said, you could... This alone is worth picking up the book if you're at all interested in Skullport. Klippinger has added just a bunch of stuff. There are maps. There are more detailed descriptions of how to get there and how to get out. And then there is a appendix of monsters and NPCs, which includes some really, really good and interesting enemies and NPCs. Bullywugs, which I'm a huge fan of, missing so far from 5th edition. Kraken priests and servants of the Great Old One. Sea Spawn and Scum. If you are looking for some Lovecraftian inspiration, and if you are looking to throw some sort of aboleth into your campaign, this is a great resource to draw from. This would be potentially very helpful if you were running a Ghosts of Saltmarsh campaign, especially as you get to the later chapters, which involve more Krakens and aboleths and sea scum and awful monstrosities from the deep. There's just a bunch of good stuff here and good ideas. So I'm a huge fan of this book. Like I've said, I'm running a Dungeon of the Mad Mage, or at least in part, campaign, and was just absolutely lost about Skullport. So this has been a big help for me. So my biggest recommendation is that if you are running anything that involves Skullport or Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and really if you are operating in and out of Waterdeep, but especially if you're doing that or a Ghost of Saltmarsh campaign and you're looking for another location or for something to expand upon, something to add some flavor and depth to your campaign, this is a really, really excellent resource. It's obviously most useful, right, specifically if you're going to just transport the main campaign of Waterdeep Dragon Heist into a different setting, but it's honestly like a really great and useful book. We had Alex Klippinger on in a previous episode. We're big fans of his work. He does a lot of really great third-party stuff. So if you're at all interested in Skullport, if you're running a pirate campaign, if you're doing Waterdeep Dragon Heist, or you're thinking about it and you want to mix it up a little bit, if you are looking for some new factions for any of your Waterdeep campaigns, or any of, you're just really anything on the Sword Coast, take a look at this. We'll have a link in the description. Thanks again to Alex for sharing this with us. Sorry it took us so many months to get around to review, but 2 tentacly thumbs up to Skullport, Dragon Swindle. Great book. Take a look. And thanks everyone for listening, and keep rolling the dice.
Release the Kraken!